What's going on, guys? Most of you know that I have been lifting the majority of my 52-year life. And a lot of you have asked how I get my traps and my shoulders the way that they are. Now, if you want to know reps and sets and rest periods, you can check out my online program. I've got it linked in the description, because otherwise it's going to take me forever to go over all of that. I want to show you today quickly a little bit of insight into my traps and shoulder routine. Let's go. Now, one of the things I like to do when I get into the gym to do shoulders is pre-exhaustion. And I've done this a lot more since I've gotten older. I did do it a bunch when I was a kid, but I now do it more so that I have less stress on my joints. I don't have to lift as much weight, and I get very, very similar results. So I take basically a weight that I can handle relatively easily, and I like to hit all three heads of the deltoid, all three heads of the shoulder before I go into a more compound exercise. So all I like to do a front raise and a side raise combo. The nice thing about the front raise, side raise combo is that I also get abdominals. There's a little bit of a rotational component. And when I do my warm up and get blood pumping and flowing into my muscles, I make sure that I don't go too high on the shoulder. So a lot of people, you'll find, go way up. I don't need to do that. I just want to get a nice, solid pre-exhaustion right now in the anterior and the medial delt, so the front and the middle delt. And once I get a bunch of those, I like to go straight into some nice, easy lateral raises. By this point, again, I've got some pre-exhaustion, and I really feel it. I really feel my shoulders immediately, as opposed to using a really heavy weight that everything else other than my shoulders works. I get a lot of triceps work. I don't feel it in my shoulders. So obviously I want to get my rear delt. I just simply lean forward, and I want to really make a mind-body connection with my rear delts. Nice and easy. I kind of flow. I don't touch the dumbbells, almost like I've got two magnets that repel each other at the bottom, and that really helps to get my rear delts firing. So right before the dumbbells should hit, they repel, and I hang all of that weight on my rear delts. So now I've got blood in my shoulders. I can now go to a barbell overhead press, and you get a lot of people that say, well, don't do overhead presses. You should never do them again, especially as you get older. And that's fine if you never want to be able to lift anything up over your head. So I still want to do that. This has been a staple exercise for me since I was younger. Now I'm already fatigued, so I've got a slightly closer grip on this. Make sure my abs are nice and tight, glutes are nice and tight, and then try to push my body right through. Some people like to come all the way down to the chest. If you've got the mobility to do that, great. If not, get it slightly below the chin. Keeps a lot of tension on the shoulders and makes it a lot more difficult. So if I rest it all the way down here, taking a little bit of stress off my shoulders, I can rest for a second. It's still hard to get the reps, but I can still feel a big contraction. So right off the bat, I'm already out of breath. Shoulders are already pumped. So I've done a good job right away. I'll take a relatively short rest period, go back to my pre-exhaustion. So I'm kind of reverse supersetting. Don't do it all the time. But if you're looking for a time-saving way to do it, a more efficient way to do it, especially if you don't have a lot of time, it's a great way to do it. Pre-exhaust first, then go to the compound second. Pick another day where you come in and you hit your compounds first, and then your single joint second. They both work well, and they both yield really, really good results. So I'll give myself a little bit of rest after the overhead presses, and then I want to go right into my shrugs. And I use dumbbells for shrugs. I also use barbells, but today I'm going to show you dumbbells. I think it's a really functional way to build your traps. I'm always the guy who's carrying the most bags or the luggage or the groceries, whatever it is. So I really like to use the dumbbells. Barbell is not necessarily the most functional position, but it works really well also. Dumbbells just put you in more of like what I call a functional position, something that you may be doing in regular life, like carrying groceries or carrying suitcases or carrying anything heavy that you need to move either a short or a long distance. So with the shrugs, I like to keep my rep count relatively high. So as soon as I get up, I've got everything hanging on my traps. I want to make sure my arms are relatively straight so that I'm not using my arms, and I usually like to give a little bit of hold at the top
You all know the position. It's the I don't know position. So sometimes I'll give a little bit of hold, and other times I'll flow kind of freely. But one of the things I like to do to build my traps is a fair amount of volume. So I'll like to get somewhere between 15 and 20 reps per set. And I'm using 90-pound dumbbells now. I want to make sure the dumbbells don't touch my body. I don't want to use my body as a bridge. I want to use my traps the entire time. So as you get tired, you still want to make sure you're using your traps, not pulling up with your arms. It's kind of hard to pull 90 pounds with the arms, but can be done. So the extra volume for me tends to work really well. I mean, it gets right into my traps. They blow up. You know, a lot of people talk about traps and we talk about them being relatively genetic. If you look at all of my kids, they've got really good traps. Even my daughter. So I find traps, just like any other muscle, to be relatively genetic. I don't have a genetically big chest. I've got genetically big traps. So you kind of have to work with what you have. And you know, a lot of times you want what other people have and you forget what you actually have. It's all a gift. Now, after I've got my traps pre-exhausted, or certainly exhausted from the dumbbells, I like to go back to my barbell and work a hang clean to overhead press. And I do it with the same weight that I started with. I've got 95 pounds on the bar. You know, you have to keep in mind, I had 90 pounds each hand for the shrugs, so I've got good stimulation in the traps. When I do this hang clean to overhead press, I want to hang all of the weight on my traps initially, really pulling and hanging with my traps. I don't like the high elbow position. I'm not an Olympic lifter. I don't have that type of mobility, nor do I feel like I need to have that type of mobility. So that's all personal preference, choice. I like to have my elbows in a ready to press overhead shoulder position. So that means my elbows are underneath my wrists, so that as soon as I come up after the hang clean, I can then press up. I'm not cleaning and jerking, I'm not snatching. I'm doing it with purpose. I'm making sure that I concentrate on the muscle groups that I want, which are traps initially, shoulders second. So I'm always thinking about hanging the weight on the shoulders. If I use too much weight here, I find that I really don't feel it in my traps. I'll feel it everywhere else. I'll get wildly out of breath, which is great, but I don't really feel on my traps. So with this position, I kind of hinge forward a tiny, tiny bit, but I've got the weight hanging on my traps. And I pull with my traps and then go into that overhead position. Pull with the traps right into the overhead position. Sometimes I'll just pop it up and pop it back down, only using my traps. And then maybe finish with the same number of reps overhead. And once I get done with that, not only am I out of breath, but I can feel my traps, I can feel my shoulders, and that's the most important thing. If you've got a goal at the beginning of the workout to work your traps and shoulders, and you get done, and you're just out of breath, or your triceps are totally fatigued, and that's all you can think about, you probably did something wrong and need to make some adjustments for the next time. Now, one of the ways I like to typically end my workouts, and believe it or not, sometimes I actually start with this sequence and it absolutely blows my shoulders up. I like to take basically the same weight that I use for my pre-exhaustion at the beginning, and I like to just do a lateral raise, somewhere between 30 and 40 reps. And it gets very, very challenging. I try to do them as strict as I can at the beginning, and then towards the end, when I get fatigued enough, still with control, I'll lean forward at the waist a little bit, and I'll get a little bit of a sway back up to neutral position and then right back down. And it really puts a lot of emphasis on my delts. So I've got the 25 pounds. I like to have the dumbbells angled so that they touch in the front. And I want to come up just below shoulder level. I want to get a nice rhythm. And again, when you get done with this, you'd be lucky if you can lift your arms. And if you can't lift your arms, or you really feel your shoulders, you've done it right. So this is what I'm talking about that little bit of a lean forward and a little bit of a restabilization back to neutral position. I'm creating a lot of time under tension. We've talked about that before. And I really want to hang in there
when most people get tired, what do? They quit. So right at the onset of pain and difficulty, most people stop. I want to try to keep going. I always imagine other people stopping while I'm still going. And that is how you make a lot of progress. So I don't know how many reps that I just got. All I know is that I feel it. Not only do I feel it in my delts, but I also feel it in my traps. So I know I got the workout right. Start with that sequence of 30 to 40 reps, or finish with that sequence of 30, 40 reps. It makes the workout different if you do it at the beginning, obviously. Everything else gets a lot harder. And if you do it at the end, it's still extremely challenging because you should already be fatigued. So now you have a little bit of insight into how I build my shoulders and my traps. Of course, this is not the only way that I do it. For me, deadlifts with heavier weight really works my traps, especially as I get towards the top part of the deadlift. Trap bar deadlifts, same kind of thing. So there are a lot of different ways that you can improve the size and quality of your traps and your delts. There really is no one perfect way. Try out a lot of different things, get out of the box, and you will certainly have fantastic results. If you enjoyed this video as much as I did, and you have a serious trap and shoulder pump, please like and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you all the next time. Let's go.